Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. I'm Alex, host of this weekly occurring podcast. I realized we're approaching nearly 50 episodes. I think I think this might be episode 40, so we're 10 episodes away from 50 episodes, which means I've been doing this for 50 weeks, which is a terrifying thought because I technically started it when I was in college. That's a weird thought. Anyway, I'm here with Melissa. We don't have a specific topic in general. We're doing an audience Q&A episode. We thought it'd be nice to reconvene. We did this somewhat recently, but we really enjoyed doing it. We thought it was a lot of fun, thought it was really informative. It opened up the, I think, dynamics of the show and allowed us to, I think, view the episode more democratically, because I think there's things that we often think are important to talk about, whether that's the, inside baseball of MAM or, what's going on at other institutions. But honestly, I think having the questions from the audience come in for us to examine and talk about. So you don't have to sit in silence on your microphone anymore. You're on mic.
Well, I wanted to make sure you did your whole intro spiel before I cut in
and
said hello.
That's all right. So I guess we should just jump right in. We have 5 questions, so we're going to kind of just go back and forth with these. So I guess opening up the first question, this is from an audience member. They asked, what drew employees to art and working in the museums? Obviously, there's only 2 of us here, so we can only speak to the 2 of us. But I am going to be curious to ask some of our colleagues. I have an idea for episode 50 that I've been thinking about that's going to involve me very briefly interviewing a handful of people in and around the museum. So it's got the gears turning. So thanks for this question. Melissa, do you want to kick it off, or do you want me to kind of start?
I can kick it off, and because I was thinking about this, because you gave me these questions a few minutes before we got on mic.
Only a few minutes.
I did not have time to prepare for anything, so don't worry. These are authentic answers. But I think, because I was trying to think what made me want to work in a museum, because when I first started studying art history in college, I knew pretty much right away that I didn't want to work in academia. I wanted to more focus on museum work. And it was such a broad term, but I think the thing that made me interested in it was the connection to the public, that you are creating things, you are creating content, whether it's wall labels or exhibition catalogs or designing exhibitions, or what we do in marketing, creating videos and web pages and social posts. What you're creating is not going to be in a vacuum, or is not going to be in a text that only a select few people read. It's for the public, it's for the masses to engage with, and you're bringing people into the space that you created or that you care about. And I think that that's what drew me to museums, is that I was creating things or writing things that were for other people and not just myself. Mm-hmm. And I wanted people to enjoy what I was creating. I wanted people to take something away from it. So
yeah, I think it's a really great answer, and way more pointed and direct and meaningful than my answer. So my answer kind of starts from when I was a kid and has nothing to do with museums. Mm-hmm. I have always been a storyteller. I think that's kind of cliche and cringy to say, but it's true. There's videos of me when I was a little kid, babbling in a Power Rangers costume, creating worlds and stories in my head.
What color Power Ranger?
I was in a green costume, specifically. And yeah, it was a pretty awesome costume. I think it was a hand-me-down, but still. So anyway, I've always been telling stories, and I always knew that, I think from an early age, I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I didn't really know what that meant. And, in middle school, I think I figured out pretty early on, especially because I went to such a small school, that I could really just do whatever I wanted and kind of get away with it. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I was a bad student or a bad kid, but I don't know, I just, in my brain, I thought that it was more engaging and more fun to make videos than write a paper, which, funny enough, I was probably making more work for myself doing that, but I thought I was like gaming the system. And so I'd have these classes where I was like, can I just do like a video essay instead? And that allowed me to be creative and play with a camera and play with like editing software and tell stories in a different medium. And I thought forever that I was going to be like a filmmaker and study film in college. And then in high school, that's where I first started to dive into museums. I joined the French Club, started going to the Met and the MoMA, and I remember distinctly at the MoMA seeing like a lot of like film exhibitions, which, you know, it kind of plays into a future question, but I'm going to leave that there. But I remember when you think of like, you know, like you kind of know film is art and movies are art, but like it didn't really click with me until I was at a museum and I saw filmmakers being displayed alongside Picassos and alongside Van Goghs. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then even really before that, probably still in that middle school, early high school era, I remember might have been, I don't know, 2015, 2016 maybe. I remember there was an Apple commercial that was really, really powerful. I think it was like a Pride Apple commercial. And I just thought it was really well done. And that led me to like looking at other Apple commercials. And I was like, oh, like, I don't know, like these feel like cinema. Like these don't feel like advertisements. These don't feel like marketing, even though I knew exactly what they were. And I remember being like at that age being like, Apple should make movies. And here we are. And they are. They're making some of the best shows on television. Shout out Ted Lasso. But like, I remember distinctly watching those commercials and having this realization of like, oh, you can do marketing or do commercials or do corporate storytelling. I didn't have the words corporate storytelling at the time, but like you could do that sort of thing and be creative and not just like, I guess, be doing whatever sort of normal, corporate shilling. And so then that led me to college, where I realized, okay, I don't want to be a filmmaker. I want to do something broader. That led me to communication, which allowed me to do way more. And then, kind of that love of museums that was kind of always there in high school, then translated when I saw the job listing pop up here. And so it was kind of just serendipitous that, I had found this love of art later in my teenage years, and I could couple that with the exact same thing that I had watched on, television, these commercials that I remember thinking weren't really commercials. And now I get to do that for a career. So it was kind of an accident and serendipitous, but I'm thrilled, and I love the museum industry, and I feel like I found a perfect home in this world. So that was my very long-winded way of saying, that's how I got into working in museums and around the art. But yeah, I got another question for you, Melissa.
Okay.
How does curatorial get some of the bigger pieces, sculptures and such, into MAM?
Oh boy, I feel like you should answer this because you have worked very closely with curatorial and Osana, who is our registrar and exhibition designer. And you've seen some of the tricks they have to employ to get things from the vault into the galleries. Yeah. Like, I'm just thinking of the totem pole specifically. Yeah. Where it was like, they can't just bring that up into the elevator. They had to load it onto a truck, take it around to the front entrance of the museum, and then walk it through the rest of the galleries to get it into interwoven. And
even that was tight.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's piece specific, it's exhibition specific. I think of something like Vanessa German, those were all individual pieces of sculptures that were put back together and taken apart.
I don't think people realize that a lot of times when we're moving a piece in, especially when it's a 3-dimensional piece, you're not moving the whole thing at once. No. Things come apart, things detach, and you have to reconstruct them in the space that they're going to be housed in, because that's the only way to get them through a door or to get them correctly, like,
Yeah,
put together.
take something like the Sarah Z. I'm not going to talk about specifically what went into putting it up because I think her studio would firmly advise against that. But I was there to watch it get installed, and yeah, like that is a work that probably has hundreds of different boxes that it needs to be packed up into. And that's pretty consistent for a lot of them. I think about also in the show Taking Space, there was that like that wall of metal that kind of hung in the middle of the room. If you look back on our YouTube channel, you can see that work on view in our Taking Space video. But yeah, like that, if you looked up at the ceiling, which you weren't really supposed to, but if you looked up, you'd see all of the wires and hooks that were hanging this thing and suspended in air. And it's like that was probably 2 or 3 days worth of work, if I had to guess.
And also everything is very deliberate, where everything like that comes with very specific instructions of how it's supposed to be hung, of how it's supposed to be displayed, of how it's supposed to be taken apart and put back together again. Like something like that, where it was this sheet of metal that looked like fabric kind of flowing like freely. It wasn't flowing freely. All the folds and everything were very deliberate of how it looked. It's meant to look effortless, and I think that's what like Osana and Katie, her assistant, they want it to look effortless, and they want people to not notice things. Like that's the whole point.
Yeah. No, certainly. And I think, having the videos that we make, the behind the exhibition content, where you can like literally, like if you're curious, like go watch it. We documented the totem pole being brought in. I think that's the biggest work I documented them putting up. But like, you can see the process and the thought that goes into it, and the just constant fluttering of details going through like Osana's head about like, how do we do this and not A, damage the building, or B, more importantly, damage the piece. So yeah, it's every piece is different, but it's a mix of instructions, it's a mix of time and effort, it's a mix of what can, like, being really creative with how can we use the building, like, if we can't get this up in an elevator, well, what are the other ways we can do it? And sometimes that's getting it through the main entrance, sometimes that's shimmying it up corridors and stuff. I just watched the MoMA released like a trailer for their YouTube channel, and in that there's a lot of really cool shots from videos I've seen them do before, and videos that probably haven't come out yet, where there's one shot of them getting off an elevator, and they're holding like a big package probably to go install something, and they bang it into the elevator door.
Oh no.
And I mean, obviously it was well packaged, so like I'm sure everything was fine, and they wouldn't have showed it if it wasn't fine. But I was like, yep, I've seen close calls like that before, and it's not because of not caring for the worker, not being extra diligent. It's tight. It's a small building, It's
a small building. It's an old building too.
Yeah. So anyway, Melissa, do you want to ask the next 2 questions? Do you want to pose the next 2?
Sure. So next question is, what other forms of art, like dance, do museums host?
Well, you named one. Dances. Yeah. We've had dance performances here before. I've seen videos of those performances both in the galleries and in our event space. Just off the top of my head, when I first started at MAM, it wasn't quite like I had talked about at the MoMA, where there was like movies being shown, but it was a video kind of piece. It was projected onto the wall, and you could sit and watch it. That was, my first couple months at MAM, that was on view, and that was really interesting and dynamic and very different for us. And then also in the realm of performance art, we've had some performance pieces done. I specifically, in I think episode 5 of the show, we had Eric Paul Reege moments after he did a 2-hour performance piece in Interwoven Power. It would be very, very strenuous to probably watch the entire 2-hour piece, so we cut it down to 10 minutes, but that's on YouTube and you could see that. But yeah, or you could listen to Eric Paul Reege talk about it on the show. The episode's called A Conversation with Eric Paul Reege. It's like episode 5. But yeah, so, here at MAM, obviously dance, obviously some video, and then performance, but there's tons more.
And yeah, anything. Music is another big one. Not even just like public programming like we do with Art Meets Jazz and things like that, but also I've seen it within exhibitions where sound and music are used to kind of activate things. I went to a gallery show a couple years ago, and you would walk through this corridor and you would walk past these sensors, and you would trigger a sensor that would like play some kind of sound or music. So yeah, I think more so, not even very recently, but in the last, say, 20 years, using video and sound and things like that has become more mainstream in art museums and galleries and things like that.
Yeah. I also think like, one of the, we talk about it a lot on the show, like the intersection of other forms of art and their kind of correlation with fine art. I think, I'm just thinking about like some photos of our event space, but like we've had fashion shows here,
Yeah.
There's a lot of really unique things you can do. It's not necessarily as like in the moment in creating art, but we've had book talks, which like, obviously writing and storytelling is a form of art. We've obviously had like the Montclair Story Salon where Liz Samuel's been on the show like twice now. But yeah, same thing, like live performance, lyrical storytelling, is we've had those here. There's plenty. There's tons of room for things other than the art that's on the wall. And it's great that not only us but other museums can kind of highlight that sort of thing. But yeah, there's plenty of stuff other than dance. What's next?
Next question. What sparked the idea to create this show?
I assume we mean this show is in the podcast.
I think they're talking about the podcast, not an exhibition.
So maybe actually museums are for me, as I kind of said as I joked about in my cold open, is a show that I created my senior year of college. By that point, I was technically no longer an intern. I was actually working at the museum in a part-time capacity. I was doing solely our video content and then beginning to slowly take on our social media presence. And in that same time, I was taking a podcast production class at Montclair State University. And I was like, you know what? I've already got a job seemingly secured. I really don't have the effort or time to make like some show. Like I just want to start working already. Like how can I use this to benefit my job at MAM and my career at MAM? And I said to my professor, who is still a great friend and a colleague and kind of helps produce this show to this day, I pitched it to her, and her alongside another, who actually the gentleman who now teaches the class now, John, another good friend and another ghost producer I keep joking about for this show. They essentially both told me that it was one of the best ideas that they had been pitched in the class. And the reason was when you're creating a podcast, you're looking for, tiny little islands in a chain of other islands that, if it's movies, it's like, what's your niche little island in the sea of islands that are about movies? And essentially when I pitched this show, they were like, you found an open beach. You found an entire coastline that was empty. And there's a few other museum podcasts out there. One of them, probably the biggest fish in the pond, Museum Confidential, came to MAM and interviewed Laura Allen, our Native American art curator. But other than like that show, us, a few others, there's really not a whole host of museum shows. And so we just, felt like it was a no-brainer for us to jump in. I think having a weekly show that A, talks about the museum, A, talks about the art, A, talks about other institutions, but B, C and D, is about us and about the staff and about, a look behind the scenes and a candid kind of conversation about what, museums can be and are, both for the people that work in them and those who maybe actively consume them, have never consumed them, are museum curious. But yeah, that's kind of how the show started. It was actually just a project for my senior year of college that we are now here 40 episodes later.
Yeah. I'm trying to think when we're hitting the 1 year mark.
Soon, I think.
It has to be soon.
Yeah, I'd have to look back on when we released the trailer, but that would be essentially when we actually, let's just look it up right now. So the first episode of this show came out on September 18th, 2024. Wow. So we got a little bit of time before our 1 year anniversary of the show. But yeah, that's what sparked the show. Anyway, moving on to our final question. Melissa and me. Any recommendations? And then in brackets, very explicitly, it says other than Met and other than MoMA. Do you have any other recommendations for museums to visit in the Northeast?
I guess we've talked about Met too much recently.
I think just even regardless of our conversations about it, I think it is like Met and MoMA are the big fit. Like when I talk about like in high school, like we only went to Met and MoMA. We could have went to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. We could have went here. We could have went to the Morris Museum. We could have went to DC. We could have went to Boston. Yeah. No, we always went. It was Met and MoMA. Those were the two we went to.
Yeah, that's actually fair. So first one that comes to my mind is actually in Boston. And I mentioned it before, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. I highly recommend. It's very cool. The building itself is modeled after like a Venetian palace. So there is this center courtyard that's open air, and then there's like a glass ceiling over it. It's beautiful. They have a lot of decorative arts there. They have tapestries, they have paintings and drawings, and it's all European and American and some Asian, and it's kind of presented like a salon where it's not a traditional museum exhibition where, you know, it's painting, wall label, couple feet away, painting, wall label. It's more like things are just kind of hung up everywhere and shown everywhere, and I just think it's a very cool visit. And it's also, while there is a lot of stuff there, it's not super overwhelming. Like if you were to go to the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, which is like the equivalent to the Met in New York, where it's their big general museum, which is also a great find. But if you're looking for something just a bit smaller, I think Isabella Stewart Gardner is a very good choice.
Yeah. Nice. I guess outside, because I mean, we talked about DC before. You could talk about the Portrait Gallery.
Yeah, I could give you a list of things.
Yeah, like we could talk about all of those museums, but you know, listen to a different episode where we have talked about those. I'm gonna probably keep it in New Jersey, and give some love to where I grew up in the, you know, I mean, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in farms, but my family they're from Trenton, New Jersey, and the suburbs, you know, Hamilton, that area. And Grounds for Sculpture comes to mind. You know, it's somewhere where it feels like a no-brainer that I don't know why we didn't go there in the French club. Actually, I know why. It's because my French teacher, rightfully so, just wanted an excuse for us to go to New York, which I think kids from where I grew up desperately needed to see the city. Yeah. So I get it. But yeah, like the first time I ever went to Grounds for Sculpture was when I was working here. I had to do a video with an artist who has a studio there. And it's like kind of crazy that was the first time I had ever been to Grounds for Sculpture. But yeah, it was really cool and it's really special. There's a really amazing restaurant on the grounds. It's called The Rat. But essentially it's like a French bistro that's on the grounds that is beloved. You know, it's not all of it, but a lot of the sculpture work is by this sculpture artist, Seward Johnson. And, you know, there's the very famous photo during the attacks of 9/11 of the sculpture of the Wall Street businessman with the briefcase open, and it's covered in soot, and like in the debris it almost looks like a real person that's still sitting there like checking his watch and like looking in his his briefcase. That was a Seward Johnson work. And so essentially the entire institution largely is works by him. And a lot of the works are recreations and 3D renderings in a way of like physical renderings, obviously, of Van Gogh works and different pieces that are beloved and famous. I think of like American Gothic, like there's giant sculptures of that. I don't know the artist's name, but have you ever seen those, like the giants that are buried in the ground? Have you ever seen those?
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Like the trolls.
Yeah, like there's one of those buried there.
Oh, cool.
And so yeah, there's some really, really cool, interesting stuff, and it's all sculptural, and I think it's very unique and very different. And whether you're going for dinner or you just want to walk around on a beautiful day, it's really lovely. And that would be my recommendation in New Jersey is Grounds for Sculpture. And as a MAM member, you actually get access to a lot of these places. You would know better than I. You're the one that writes the email every week talking about it. But yeah, so that was our last question. We love these Q&A episodes, so we're probably going to do these a little bit more frequently alongside our news episodes.
Yeah, add it to our rotating episodes.
Yeah. So anyway, this has been Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. Thank you so much for listening to me and Melissa ramble on these questions. Thank you so much as an audience for participating and sending us questions. Just keep an eye out on our Instagram story. Probably every month or so we'll put out a call for more questions. So we appreciate it dearly. Again, this has been Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. I'm Alex. This is Melissa.
I'm Melissa.
Yep. You can visit the Montclair Art Museum Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. This is actually the final weekend to view 2 shows before they go down for the summer. This is your last chance to see A to Z and Nanette Carter. So get here, see those. They're really special. They're really great. And in the fall, they will be replaced by Tom Nussbaum, which is going to be really exciting. Yeah, thanks so much. Rate and review wherever you listen to us, and we will talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.